I got mana screwed. Of course they're playing a brain-dead meta deck. Rigged Shuffler. Why game bug? Of course, the top deck. We've all been there. Card games are the brutal mix of deep strategy, but random chance. It makes them fun, but it can create perfect hiding spots for our fragile little egos. Bring together all of the games you've lost that stick out in your mind. The bad hands, the opponent's top decking, the perfect out encounter to every extender you play. But there is always one common denominator in every single one of your losses. You. Today, we're looking at the psychology of the excuses we make and why admitting that your losses are your own fault is the only way you will ever improve. Why are we so quick to outsource blame to any and all external factors once that defeat screen shows up? What is it about our gameplay that our ego refuses to give up on? And why are we incapable of the logical next step of what happened? What did I do wrong? And how can I prevent this from happening again? Today, we're going to be breaking down all of your common excuses, tropes, and misunderstandings of why you are losing games. First of all, beginning with some psychology. Why do we refuse to accept fault for our missteps? Number two, we'll be talking about variance, the most common card game excuse given by any player as to why they lost a game. And number three, we'll be talking about the metagame, bad matchups, and how you can change your mentality when it comes to really understanding these different concepts. And number four, the path to enlightenment, acceptance and understanding of how you can turn this around for only a singular Twitch Prime sub over on twitch.tv/Farfa or becoming a Patreon member. Let's jump into today's video. I've recently become father to a second child, and let me tell you, raising two kids is not so far off of interacting with the average Odeon player. So I've been reading a lot on the psychology of brain development and discipline. Let me tell you a little bit about the amygdala, the center of all of your primal lizard brain actions. Fight or flight comes from here, and when you lose a duel, this sends a signal to this feral little part of your brain to trigger a response. You are quite literally fighting for your life whenever you take a crushing defeat. It is the same reaction that your brain makes when you are in a dangerous situation. Losing games puts you in this fight or flight response mode, and so you either give up and quit, hiding away from your failure, or you fight it and type out yet another why game bug post on r/Masterduel asking why couldn't I SP Little Knight my opponent's monster after I used Branded Fusion? Why would Japan do this? And is Hideo Kojima giving Japanese players better hands on Masterduel? I've read that as a real post like 4 years ago on release. The fix here is to calm your inner brain and channel that energy into the frontal cortex and make logical sense of what happened. Take a break if you need to. Come back and watch the replay later and ask yourself, how could I improve this and do better? After a fresh pair of eyes are now upon the game, and you are now looking at it perhaps from a more third-person perspective. And the worst, most intolerable psychological conundrum that occurs when you lose a game is cognitive dissonance, this sort of identity crisis that happens when you lose, when you don't think it's your fault. Cognitive dissonance is the blue screen that your brain makes when two conflicting facts collide. You see, fact one is that you consider yourself a very smart and capable duelist. But fact number two is, well, you just got completely outplayed in like Diamond 4. Those two realities cannot exist within the same timeline in your brain, and so naturally the response is to just blame something out with your control. The two realities cannot exist in your head without causing actual psychological stress, and so your brain looks for an emergency escape hatch. It blames the meta, the shuffler, poor game balance, the ban list, and it instantly resolves the conflict. You see, you didn't lose because you're bad, you lost because the game is bad. Reconciling this is very simple. No matter at what level you play at, it doesn't matter if you are playing against a world champion or a child. Even if you win 100-0, there is always something to take from your duels. some little minor thing you could have done better that only got rewarded because you played badly and your opponent couldn't punish because they didn't draw a specific card to counter you. At any point in time in any duel, you can always look back and ask yourself, was this the right thing to do, and could I have done something better? Because you see, it is so easy as a player to be like, well, I won because I'm just superior. I lost because my opponent is a no-life virgin who grinds for like 15 hours a day. And while the latter can sometimes be true, it is also possible that maybe fortune favored you once in a while. But you see, when I win, it's because I'm skilled and smart. When my opponent wins, it's because they're lucky and rewarded for poor gameplay choices and never punished. These are the types of different conversations that happen in your mind subconsciously you need to be aware of. And as I just mentioned variance, let's talk a little bit about why you are, of course, just really unlucky. You see, a variance is a measure of dispersion. It's how far a set of numbers are spread out from the average value. Well, what does that look like in practical terms? If you have an average win rate of 65%, that means when you sit down for 10 duels on a Saturday afternoon and win all of them, does that mean you're now the living avatar of Joshua Schmidt? Nein, das stimmt nicht. Und Runic ist nicht der best deck. That set of 10 duels that you just played, while certainly can be partially contributed to by being a good duelist, it is certainly not standard to win 10 games in a row, at least at your appropriate ranking. In most other video games, there is a matchmaking rating, an ELO system that measures your ability corresponding to the other players in your lobby and matches, rewards, and reduces that number appropriately. The best players don't win that many games in a row because they're playing at an appropriate level, and variance plays a factor. You see, in Yu-Gi-Oh, the absolute best player in the world can lose to the worst player in the world, and vice versa, because at the end of the day, this is a card game with luck and variance being present. The thing to keep in mind is, can that happen consistently as an average over time? Did you know that I personally have a 100% win rate against the World Championship Master Duel team of Dreams Future, the Task team? I have never lost a duel to Task or Magu, and I have a score of 1-0 versus each. Does that make me a World Champion competitor level of a duelist? No, it doesn't, because the average amount of games that I would potentially play against those players would very likely result in a 15% win rate, maybe, at best. But on the other hand, you could just say, yes, actually, I am better. Comment, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Variance in Yu-Gi-Oh! Has sometimes just become a buzzword that's thrown around by bad players to, again, outsource responsibility. That's the biggest real-world takeaway that you can take away from this video. It's trying to understand what that means in a practical sense. People who are incapable of personal self-development will often blame every external factor and focus on the things that they cannot control rather on the things that can be controlled. And in real life, this can look like anything from your diet, your hobbies, the relationships you have, and the career goals you might aspire to. But without getting too existential, let's of course focus on the gameplay today. My hand was terrible! While bad hands are a natural occurrence in card games, there's a difference between bad hands and unplayable hands. I've personally lost games because I thought I didn't have a play when in actuality, I did. Perhaps there is a super niche play that only works if you draw this one-of Garnet with this other random one-of that you rarely see together, and that technically can lead to a combo. It's all about practice and learning your deck in and out at a fundamental level, not just repeating and regurgitating things that you've memorized from a spreadsheet or YouTube combo. You know the old saying, give a man a hand job, he'll come once. What? Once you get the fundamentals down, you might see lines you would otherwise not be aware of because you aren't just memorizing a spreadsheet. The reality is that you're going to brick. Yes, you will open completely unplayable hands that just simply pass. But there are always other things you could have maybe done better. You could always use hand traps a little differently. You can reevaluate your deck building and the engine card ratios. There is always something worth considering when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! And again, focus on what you can control versus what you cannot control. My opponent drew the one-of. Yes, if you put cards into your deck, you will draw them. That is a principle of card games. The reality is, people need to stop crying about it. If your opponent has a one-of that you know is popular, like Call by the Grave, sometimes it might be worth considering some other way to maybe try play around it if it is your absolute major lose condition there and then. I've managed to bait my opponent multiple times by pairing two hand traps together to force the important one through. For example, using Ash at a really clutch moment to prompt a called by to then chain a Fuwalos or a Maxi that would have otherwise been negated earlier had I not held it. Look, I'm not saying that getting shifted is a skill issue. Please don't make that what the takeaway is for you from this video. It's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is focus on the things that are in your control. If it's a hand trap heavy format, is there perhaps another deck you could maybe play that doesn't lose so hard to hand traps? Like perhaps maybe a more back row heavy strategy or control deck. There are always lots of things that you can do outside of the gameplay that can make you change up things and give you a better chance at that particular metagame, whether that be specific card and engine and side deck choices or a whole other archetype altogether. I got paired against my worst matchup. Oftentimes in Yu-Gi-Oh, metagames will devolve into rock, paper, scissors formats where X deck beats Y deck but loses to Z deck, whereas Z deck only loses to X deck, etc, etc. Sometimes that can happen and you will just get multiple bad matchups in a row. I, for example, remember a tournament I did really badly in where I metagamed specifically to beat a certain archetype but only got paired against anti-meta for like 3 rounds in a row. That was a really crushing tournament experience for myself, but at the end of the day, there's only so much you can really do about that. What are you gonna do? Complain to the head judge about the pairings? If every single Yu-Gi-Oh duel was just comparing hands, well, then we'd have an equal spread of YCS champions in the world, and we know there isn't. So clearly, the better players are doing something more often than the worst players are. And again, without trying to repeat myself too much, while you might be up against a bad matchup, that doesn't mean a bad matchup is unwinnable. For the average player, in my opinion, most duels don't even really come down to who played better. It comes down to who threw the least. The meta exists in any and all capacities within every medium of competitive play. If there's competition, there will be a best option. From what champion you play, to your talent build, your choices in the deck, and the cards you run. If you ban the S tier decks, then the A tier decks are now the best decks. But if you ban those A tier decks, well then the B tier decks then become the S tier decks, etc, etc. If you ban enough cards and complain enough about the metagame, the next best thing just comes in and takes its place until eventually you end up in a situation where you just have to ban every card ever until the best deck is Noodle Inversion Draw Control, which is a real thing for those of you who remember the Last Card Standing series on my channel. Yes, after 32 weeks of banning archetypes every week, you do end up with a best deck still. The more you sit and complain about what the best deck is and how unfair it is or overpriced it is, the less energy and time you're spending on getting actually better at the game and using the tools that you have at your disposal. Yeah, it sucks that maybe you can't afford a Fedralis or a Forbidden Crown right now, but remember what we said earlier. You can only focus on the things you can control and not the things you cannot control. You can control most of the cards that go into your deck list and the archetype you choose and the decisions you make at any given moment within a duel. I've talked about net decking multiple times on the channel, so here's the gist of it. If you want to copy other deck lists, that's fine. Don't feel ashamed or embarrassed. Why reinvent the wheel when there's already tried and successful methods out there? For some people, deck building completely blind is the best and most fun aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's also cool. Two things can be true at the same time. I know this is a crazy concept, and while I might like pancakes, that doesn't mean I hate waffles. Nobody is saying only copy decks or only build your own. You can do both, and even do a mix of both together. But from a purely competitive angle, it's all about that control of what you can versus what you can't. Are you limited on time and resources throughout your week through things like money, your career choices, work requirements, family, relationship, children? You can only do as much as you are physically capable of within a allotted time frame. Don't beat yourself up about having to steal a deck list or not being able to build the absolute most optimum $2,000 card list. How does this tie into being bad? Because complaining about not being able to do things won't get you to where you want to be. If you want to become a YCS champion, you're gonna need a YCS champion's mentality. And the one thing that separates the winners from the rest of us is attitude. Pac, Ryan, Jesse, and Josh, these players didn't get to where they are because of some inherent ephemeral gift from God. Hard work and dedication is the predominant ingredient in these players' success, and an iron will to be able to self-criticize, improve, and not outsource blame and excuses to external factors they cannot control. The point of this video is to not say that you should just become more skillful at the game and draw the out to the dimension shifter when it's drawn against you, or cry about it if Maxi is dropped and you don't have Ash Blossom. The reality is, yeah, you are going to lose a lot of games that are out of your control, that no matter who held the cards in your hand, they would lose without a doubt. But always remember, play to your win condition, play to your outs. There is always a path to success in most cases. And even if there isn't, you can at least always make peace with yourself that you can only move forward and on to the next game and try and focus on what you could have improved and not what you cannot improve. There is a reason that there are so many more players out there in the world with higher win rates than you are. And again, like I said at the start of the video, all of your losses only has one common denominator, and that is you. Some of them might not actually be your fault at all, but some of them probably are, and you just aren't realizing it. Thank you so much everyone for tuning into this video. If you've watched this far, then hashtag skill issue in the comment section. Please subscribe if you haven't already if you enjoy this type of content. And don't forget that I stream on twitch.tv/Farfa pretty much daily at around about morning times US, late afternoon EU. I'll see you in the next one. Adios!